Again, welcome everyone. Those of you who maybe haven't met, I am Kim Stodghill, owner and counselor at Stodghill College Consulting. I know many of the names I'm recognizing as you're coming in, and those of you who we don't yet know, we're grateful to have you here. We definitely have an expert here tonight to talk about this topic with us. He was commenting as we reunited on pre-gaming tonight that we are old friends, and we are old in many ways now because we've known each other a very long time. I think my entire career for the past 20 plus years, I have known Kerry Thompson, and I will leave it at that and let him introduce himself more formally in a minute. But Claudia, why don't you say hello?
Hi, all. I know some of you. I also recognize some of the names. My name's Claudia Melchuk, and I am based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I joined Kim earlier this year, and I'm thrilled to be working with her. She and I have known each other, again, a long time. And it's fun to be collaborating and working together. And a lot of times I want to mention that Kim and I work behind the scenes on a lot of the students. So you're getting the benefit of two voices, even though you always have a lead counselor that's working with your family. But it's just a pleasure to be here. And I'm so appreciative of Kim and the opportunity.
Thanks. Carrie, let us know who you are. Take it away.
Terrific. Well, thank you. And thank you, Kim, and thank you, Claudia. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and it's great to see old friends. And it has been a long time that we've all known each other, and that's true in the college admission world. A lot of us know each other, and it's a very collegial field. So I'm again delighted to be here. Kim, do you want me to just start presenting from here, or?
Yes, let's just dive right into your presentation, and
sure.
You should have all the ability to share as you need to.
Okay. Well, just a little bit about my background. I am Vice President for Enrollment and Educational Services at Gettysburg College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's a wonderful place, about 2,500 students in South Central Pennsylvania, about an hour or so from Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, a little further to Philly, but it's in a great location, 3.5 hours or so to New York. So our students have lots of opportunities for internships and access to major cities while having all the benefits of being on a historic residential campus in a town that we've all heard of and many of us have visited, and we certainly encourage you to come give us a visit. Prior to Gettysburg, I was at Rhodes College in a similar position, a vice president for enrollment. Was there for 12 years. Prior to that, I was at Center College, which is outside of Lexington, Kentucky, as vice president for enrollment. And prior to that, I was at Furman University, which is my alma mater, and I was there for 16 years, plus my student days, was director of admission there. And so most of my experience has been below the Mason-Dixon line. I am technically above the Mason-Dixon line by about 7 miles at this point. And in a beautiful area. I've always been involved in admission and financial aid, career services to some extent. Here at Gettysburg, I supervise athletics and recreation and wellness. So it's just a really interesting place to be. Kim and Claudia have asked me to talk about financial aid and how it works. And it's really not that it's not that complicated. What we're going to do is go over just some basic philosophy and concepts. I am not going to talk about row 37 on the FAFSA. You'll be delighted to know that. I couldn't even tell you what row 37 is, but that's relatively minor. Filling out the forms is a little like filling out your taxes, not quite that complicated, and it's helpful if you've had your taxes completed. But that's not the level of detail that we're going to get in here tonight. We're going to talk about the philosophy behind financial aid and merit scholarships. So if I can, let me go ahead and share my screen and start a slideshow. And there we go. And we'll share and we'll start. So there we go. I'm
Love it.
imagining that, Kim, Claudia, does that sound about right?
That does sound about right. Yes.
I might know my audience, I might not, but I'm just guessing here.
Thank you.
But we do have, it's a stressful time. I'm the father of 3 and two stepsons as well. So getting students through this process, helping them get through this process is something I've got some experience with, not only professionally, but also personally. So what we want to really focus on is what this is about. And we are trying to find and make possible is in bold there, the best college match for the student so that she reaches her fullest potential to become a productive member of society. All right. That's what we all want as parents. We want our child to reach their potential, to find the place they belong, to learn and explore new ideas and new possibilities. We want to make possible that experience so that they can do that. What this is not about, here we go. Well, let's do it this way, is finding the cheapest deal. You can do that in this process if you want. You can try to find the cheapest deal. And I would argue you might get what you pay for. The opportunity, and there are some colleges that are going to try to approach you on that basis. I would start asking some questions. If they start leading with money, if that's their first argument for choosing them, I would ask a lot of questions at that point. I think you're going to be most interested in the quality of the academic experience, the quality of the student life experience, the people that will be around your child, what their goals are, what their aspirations are. That's, to my way of thinking, all far more important than finding the cheapest deal. So here's the rocket science. Everybody hold on to your chairs. Guess what? There are 3 ways to pay for college: before, during, and after. That's the deal. Before, during, and after. Hopefully, those of us on this Zoom call will have saved some money for college for our children. That's a challenge for a lot of families, but if you happen to be from a family that's a reasonable thing to do, I certainly encourage you to do that. There is a myth out there that if you save a lot of money for college, you're not going to get as much financial aid. In some ways, that might be true. There's a sliver of truth to that. On the other hand, I've never been in a circumstance where having less money was more beneficial than having more money. If you have more money saved, you have more options. You are not dependent on a college coming through with just the right amount of financial aid. So savings is incredibly important. And again, those who would say that savings reduces your ability or eligibility for aid, I don't think they're looking at a big picture. Student savings is also important. I think it's really important for students to have some skin in this game. They can save some money. Many of them have part-time jobs. Many of them have gifts from grandma, whatever it might be. They can save some money, and that's going to be an advantage for them down the road as well. During, most families pay for most of college during the experience. They have need-based aid. They might have merit-based aid. There are all kinds of different resources, from federal and state grants, third-party grants, college work study, all sorts of things that current earnings from parents, current earnings from students. Those are all ways to help pay for college during the experience. And then after, educational loans. There's a lot of media, a lot of news stories about the student debt crisis. And that is no doubt true. On the other hand, there are reasonable loans that families can take, students can take, that assist in paying for college and take the pressure off during college. The average student at Gettysburg College that comes to us from high school, by the time they graduate, those that take loans, it's an average of about $25,000. That's not an unreasonable amount of money for a young person to pay back over 10 years at a relatively low interest rate. So there are options there. There are also other third-party loans, private loans, and financing programs. I would normally encourage most families to stay with the federally backed Stafford loans rather than go off to get private loans. A lot of the horror stories you hear really are related to private loans, third-party loans from banks and other loan agencies that may not be quite as, how shall I say, easy to work with as the Stafford loan is. So there are two types of aid that we're talking about here. One is need-based aid, also called financial aid. The other is merit-based aid, which is also called scholarship. Sometimes these words, people get lazy with how they use them, and they conflate them and they use them interchangeably. But if you can think in terms of need-based aid and merit-based aid, need-based aid is what is awarded to you on the basis of the family's financial circumstances, how much the family makes, how many kids there are in the family, medical bills, all sorts of different factors are taken into consideration when talking about need-based aid. And we'll talk a little bit more about both of these as we go along. Merit-based aid are funds that are awarded to the student based on their character and qualifications. It is normally competitive. It has to do with their grades, maybe their test scores, maybe how high they can jump. I would put athletic scholarships in the merit-based aid category, maybe how well they can play the piano, anything that has to do with a talent or ability. This is outside of need-based aid, all right? So these two things are separate, but a student can have both forms, one form or neither, depending on financial need, ability and talent, enrollment goals and revenue goals of the college in question. So again, a student can have both, neither, one, depending on individual circumstances. And that's when people start getting confused about how all this works and the terminology that allows families to conflate one type of aid with another. So should you apply for aid? I would say yes. If your family is at all concerned about paying for college, if that is an inkling in your mind, there's a question in your mind, you should apply for aid, need-based aid and merit-based aid. You should also do it if your home state requires it. And there are a lot of state-based programs that require that you complete the FAFSA, and they use that information. You'll be directed to send the FAFSA information to the state scholarship agency. So that may be another requirement. Some states don't allow for you to apply for that if you were to transfer, if you were to go to college initially out of state and then come back. If you didn't apply for aid as a high school senior, it's too late to do it at that point. So if in doubt, I would go ahead and do that. If colleges of choice suggest or require it. That to me takes in about 95% of families, especially those who might be considering expensive private higher education. Otherwise, no. If you are fortunate enough to be able to pay for college and you know it, don't worry about it. There are families out there that can do that, that can write the check and make that happen. God bless them. They're in a fortunate position. Most of the rest of us have to think about how we're going to do this. So if you have to think about it, you should probably apply for aid. All right, so let's figure out how this works together, how it all comes together. So cost of education is a technical term. It doesn't sound too technical, but it is a technical term, and it is composed of the direct plus the indirect costs associated with college. So direct costs are tuition, room and board, and indirect costs are books, personal expenses, transportation, health insurance. Those sorts of things are not normally paid directly to the college, but they are necessary for a student to have a reasonable existence in college. So direct costs plus indirect costs, colleges take both into consideration as the cost of education. That indirect cost does not mean that you can buy a Maserati for your child and call it transportation and the college includes that indirect cost. There's a reasonable budget associated here that colleges set. All right, nobody's buying a Maserati for their kid. Another definition or term that's really important for us to know about. The FAFSA and the CSS profile. Those are two different forms. Let's talk about the FAFSA first. That stands for Free Application for Federal Student Assistance. That's the federal form. Every college in America uses this form to establish federal eligibility for the Pell Grant, for student loan, and most colleges use it to establish need, how much the family needs. We're going to talk about that in a minute. To pay for their son or daughter to go on to a given college. It's web-based. It looks a lot like your 1040. It's helpful to have completed your 1040, but not necessarily. And in this case, you can pull up a 1040 you've already completed, actually. Much like test scores, you designate which colleges are to receive the results, and it's a snapshot of your financial life. It's a snapshot of your financial life as of December 31st, 2 years prior to entry, 18 months really, 18 months prior to entry. All right. So in this particular year, COVID is not going to show up on the FAFSA. We can talk more about that later if there are some questions, right? But if there was job loss or so forth due to COVID, that's not going to show up on this FAFSA. There are ways to deal with that. We'll talk about that. The CSS profile is an additional form. Call it the FAFSA on steroids. Usually expensive and highly selective colleges will require the CSS profile, and it's a deeper dive. It's not a snapshot, it's a full portrait of your financial life. So families, it's especially important to colleges for families that might own their own businesses, that own multiple homes or multiple cars. It's going to be a more in-depth look. And here's another definition that's important, and we're going to talk about this one in a minute as well. The expected family contribution, or EFC, is what is calculated upon submission of a FAFSA and a CSS profile. That's the bottom line, based on your income and assets and number of kids in the family and how many are in college at one time and all sorts of other financial variables that we all experience in life. A calculation comes out called the expected family contribution, and that's considered a family's capacity to pay. So it could be anywhere from $0. That's a family with literally no wealth to speak of, and maybe very low income, to at the top of the scale is $999,999. That's as far as the digits have in the system, right? So there's that enormous range, again, based on the family circumstances. All right, so we've got cost of education. We know what that's about. We know we apply for aid using the FAFSA and or CSS profile. The colleges that require the CSS profile are going to require both. So you're not going to just get away with applying for or using one for those colleges that require the CSS profile. And the expected family contribution, the family's capacity to pay. All right, so let's determine need then. So cost of attendance, start there. We know that's direct and indirect costs. Costs vary across American higher education. You can go to a place that costs $10,000 a year or even less. In community college, you can go to a very expensive private college that probably costs $70,000 to $80,000 a year at this point. All right, so cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution equals the family's demonstrated need, demonstrated financial need. So let's take that for a minute and let's use, we'll call it institution X that costs $80,000 a year. We're going to use round numbers just to keep the math easy here. So an $80,000 a year institution, and let's say your family's expected family contribution is $50,000. You can afford $50,000 a year based on the FAFSA and the CSS profile. In that particular scenario, your family has a demonstrated need of $30,000. And that's what a college will go to work with and pulling different resources together to meet that $30,000. The college is not legally obligated to meet that need. They might exceed that need with a merit scholarship that's in excess of $30,000. They may decide that they don't have enough money to meet that need, and they come up with a $25,000 financial aid package. So there's no requirement on the part of the college to come up and meet that need. But I will also say colleges are in the business of attracting students. So they are well aware that making it possible for students to attend based on this information is in their best interest and something they're going to typically want to do and do pretty well. So that's how need is determined in very simple terms. If the cost of attendance in this particular scenario was $50,000, your expected family contribution doesn't change. And in that scenario, you have zero demonstrated financial need. They're going to pat you on the back, send you an admit letter, hopefully, and tell you to, pack the car and come on. Different scenarios based on cost of attendance. Expected family contribution doesn't change. All right, so need-based sources. And by the way, I can't see you, so if there are questions coming, I'm sure Kim and Claudia will interrupt me, so please do, or we can wait till the end and take them then. But there are various different need-based sources. Institutional grants, that's college money. At Gettysburg, that's Gettysburg money that we are committing to a student who has demonstrated need. Grants can range anywhere from, it depends on the institution, from a few $100s up to tens of thousands of dollars. And it's up to the institution to decide its own policy on the distribution of that institutional grant. Federal grants, Pell Grants. So that family with the zero EFC that I might have referenced as part of the range, that's a family that's going to qualify for a Pell Grant. Pell Grants, I think, are about $6,500 right now. And that is money the federal government provides to the lowest income students so that they have an opportunity to go to college. So it's a very important federal program. The family with that $999,000 EFC will never see a Pell Grant. And so don't even worry about it. But the Pell Grant is the basis of the federal financial higher education program. federal loans. That's the other foundation of the federal financial aid would be the Stafford and the PLUS. The Stafford is a student loan, and it's worth $5,500. Low interest. It's paid back over 10 years. Usually that interest rate, I haven't seen it recently. It's usually around 6 or 7%. A PLUS loan is a parent loan. And that loan is based not on need, but creditworthiness. And so families can take out anywhere from a couple $1,000s to the full cost of education if they wanted to. I would caution a family not to do that at the full cost of education. That's a problem, especially when you multiply it times 4. And that assumes your child will graduate in 4 years. And all of us think our child will graduate in 4 years, but there's about half of them that don't. So keep that in mind. But the PLUS loan, again, based on creditworthiness and can cover the cost of, help cover the cost of education. Other need-based sources, federal work study, that's the job. If there are any students on this Zoom, you need to understand loans and you need to understand work study if those are parts of your financial aid package. Unless you work out a sweet deal with mom and dad, you're paying back the loan, right? And you need to account for that and keep that in mind. If you're awarded federal work study, guess who's working? That would be you. And you're probably working 10 to 15 hours a week. You're making, it depends on the college, but at least $7.25, which is federal minimum wage. Colleges may choose to increase that over time. And you may be working in the dining hall or in the residence halls or in the library or the athletic department, checking IDs, all sorts of things. But that's a good way to help pay for college, especially incidentals like books and pizza money and those sorts of things. State grants and programs. I don't know where everybody on the Zoom is from, so you may have a state grant in your state. And that's something you'll want to look into. That will probably limit your college search to that state if you want to take advantage of that, and it may be worth doing. It may not. That's up to you and a judgment that you all will have to make. So when do we file? As soon as possible after October 1st. So coming up very soon,
Friday.
ed.gov, you'll be able to find the FAFSA and you'll be able to start completing that FAFSA for your child. Aid does run out. I wouldn't worry about it in October, but I also wouldn't procrastinate until March. Usually November, December, January, those are prime months for completing the FAFSA, making sure everything's submitted, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. I personally would not wait until February. You probably can, but I wouldn't. So that's something you want to get done by the end of January for sure. And when I say aid does run out, that can be true of state programs. Not the federal system, but the state programs may run out of aid, and it's first come, first serve. All right, projecting aid. How much aid am I likely to get? That's a question we get all the time, and our best answer is it depends, which is not an answer that most families like to hear, and I'm well aware of that, but every family is different. And the circumstances are different, and we don't have all the information. Typically, we don't have all that information in front of us when we're asked that question. So there are a couple tools, though, that can really help you do that on your own. Every college in America has what's called a net price calculator on their website. That can be a very helpful tool. It's going to ask you a lot of the same questions that the FAFSA and CSS Profiler are going to ask you. Most colleges have tried to simplify it, so it's not quite as in-depth, and it should give you a pretty good sense. It won't be exact, most likely, but it should give you a pretty good sense, and it's in a college's best interest to make it as helpful as possible. Some of them include merit scholarship, and you have to include your grade point average and and test scores if you have them, and all those sorts of things. And maybe they can give you a sense of that as well. Different net price calculators allow you to save your work and share that with the college, or give you the option to, but not require you to. So that can be a really helpful tool. And I would encourage you to give that a shot. If you're already a senior, I'd just wait for the FAFSA. You're going to get an EFC pretty quickly after completing that. Early reads. A lot of colleges, and this would be for junior families, you can inquire typically in the late spring, summer, between the junior and senior year, and inquire as to whether a college will provide an early read. You would submit your transcript, high school transcript up until that point, test scores if you have them, and the college may be able to turn around an estimate on merit scholarship. If they offer that, they may not. Not every college does, but that could give you a little bit of a sense of where you might fit, or where your son or daughter might fit in that context. Excuse me. Not every college does an early read, but it's worth asking. And they're typically going to be private colleges that do that. I doubt you'd find too many public institutions that would do that. Meeting full need. So that's a question that you should feel free to ask any college that you have a conversation with. What are your financial aid policies? You don't need to get too deeply in the weeds, but you can ask, do you meet full need? And that gets back to that question or that issue I talked about a little while ago. Colleges aren't legally required to meet full need. They may do what's called gap a student, but you can certainly ask that question. Most colleges probably don't meet full need. And I'm talking about private colleges and universities in this context. State institutions don't typically have a lot of institutional aid that they award. You're a citizen of that state. You pay taxes. They set the tuition relatively low. You qualify for need-based aid, and you're done. Private colleges at more expensive places, they have institutional aid. They have to decide how they're going to distribute it. So they may meet full need for some students and not others. They may exceed need for some students and not others. So asking that question is it's a fully reasonable question to ask of a given institution. All right. So merit-based aid, we've talked about need-based aid at this point. That's one type of financial aid. That's one type of resource for you to be considering. It's based on your family's financial circumstances. So we should be clear on that at this point. Merit-based aid, I said, you might remember I said earlier, it's based on the student's characteristics and the competitive pool and the talents and abilities of the student relative to that pool. It's going to be, and this is important to know, institution specific. So a given student applying to college A may be very competitive for admission, may be very competitive in that applicant pool, and may be very competitive for a very large scholarship in that context. But at college B, that student might be lucky to get in. A merit scholarship's not even part of the conversation. Can they get in? Different colleges have different expectations, different competitive pools. No matter how deserving you think your child might be, and I'm sure they're very deserving, different colleges are going to approach this in different ways. The Ivy League doesn't offer merit aid, so that's not even on the table. There are a number of other institutions that don't offer any kind of merit aid. Gettysburg, we do. And that's one of the ways that we have chosen to compete and attract some of the best students in the country. All right, so institution specific. There's a wide range of values and reasons to offer. So a merit scholarship could range from a few $100s up to full tuition, room, and board. The larger the scholarship, the more competitive it's going to be to receive it. So that's a reasonable question to ask a given college, what that looks like in their context and how you might measure up in that context. And they should be willing to give you some guidance on that. They won't be able to give you at this stage of the year because they don't know what their applicant pool looks like. They may not even know exactly how many scholarships they're going to offer at this stage of the year, but they can tell you over the last couple of years, you would measure up this way. And that might give you some guidance. There are lots of different reasons to offer, whether it be academic talent, musical talent, athletic talent, leadership talent. If you can imagine a specific sort of talent, there's probably a college somewhere offering a scholarship that recognizes that, but not all colleges are going to offer that to all students. There are no, I'll take Gettysburg again as my example. There are no cheerleading scholarships at Gettysburg, but there are colleges that offer cheerleading scholarships. So again, lots of variation between colleges. Your merit scholarship will typically fill financial need first if there is need. Let's read that one again. Merit aid typically will fill financial need first if there is need. So if you are that family with $30,000 of need that we talked about a little while ago, and we offer you a $25,000 merit scholarship, that $25,000 will be applied against that $30,000 need. That's where we start. Congratulations, you got a great scholarship. And then we'll fill in the other 5,000 and maybe exceed it depending on circumstances. It depends on the college again as to whether how they might handle that. But merit aid will typically fill financial need first. Deadlines and directions are critical. Everybody in college admission is very focused on being as fair as they can possibly be. And one of the ways that we can be fair to everyone, no matter what, is if we have deadlines and if we have directions. So we're not being bureaucratic, we're trying to be fair. And if you're a day late, you may be $1 short. This may be one of those moments where that actually literally is true. So meet the deadlines, follow the directions. The directions are in writing, either on a website or on a piece of paper. If you have questions, ask them, but I suggest you read the directions first. And you're going to get a much more nuanced conversation if you have with the college, if you're able to know the basics before you make the phone call or visit. There are third-party merit scholarships. So, and they may be unique to your hometown. They may be unique to mom or dad's place of employment. There are corporate scholarships. There are Kiwanis scholarships. There are regional scholarships that are awarded to students. They may be relatively small. They may be just for 1 year, but every little bit helps. And why wouldn't you do a little research and figure that out? There's and Kim and Claudia probably have some other resources they could point you toward, but there's a website called fastweb.com. There's the collegeboard.com, I believe, has a resource page. So there are places where you can search for third-party scholarships. Do not pay anyone for a third-party scholarship or to pay to complete an application for a third-party scholarship. Don't do that. Don't pay money for someone to help you fill out your FAFSA. You can do this. This is where there are some people in the field that you just don't want to hang out with. And those are going to be people that ask you to pay for third-party scholarships. All right, last slide. What this comes down to is some well-informed evaluation of the value of the institutions. You got to do your homework. You absolutely have to do your homework. Kim and Claudia are experts. They can help you do that. They can make sure that you're asking the right questions of yourself and of the institution. They can't do this for you, though, in the sense that you ultimately are responsible for making the evaluation. And so do that homework. And then just personal and professional advice, focus on your child's interests and abilities and your family's values. There are different kinds of colleges and universities out there for different kinds of students, different kinds of families, for the very conservative family, for the very liberal family, for the families in between, for the families that want to stay close, or the families that want to send their child far, or the child who wants to go far. All of those things are important and need to be a part of the conversation. And we can talk about that a little bit more as well. I'm going to stop right there and turn it back over to Kim and Claudia and see what kinds of questions might have popped up.
Excellent. Thank you, Carrie. Well, I had one question popped up and I gave a quick answer, but there may be something for you to elaborate on. The question was generally, when you're talking about scholarships, is there a standard way to apply? How are you in that pool? How are you considered for scholarships? Obviously, the first answer is it depends, and it depends on the institution and what their approach is to that. Can you elaborate for us a little bit on how might that happen depending on how the college operates?
Yeah, it might happen in a lot of different ways. If I have a music conservatory on my campus, that's going to be important, and my music faculty want an oboist this year, right? And oboists, believe it or not, don't grow on trees. And so that becomes a priority for the college. You might, if I were representing an NCAA Division I school, my men's soccer coach may need a goalkeeper, right? And that becomes a priority. Now, those are two fairly specialized scholarships. More generally, and we'll use Gettysburg as the example because that's what we do here. If I have a student who is at the top of her class and taking a very demanding high school curriculum, and writes a beautiful essay and helps little old ladies across the street and is a leader in her community somehow, that may be a student who looks really good in our applicant pool. And we will maybe go with a larger scholarship, an above average scholarship for a young person like that, perhaps. Compared to the student who is a good student, has a 3.7 unweighted and maybe 3 or 4 APs and plays on a club soccer team. That's an average student for us. That's not going to be somebody who's going to receive the largest merit scholarships that we might have. So hopefully, I mean, it's relative to the competitive profile of the institution. And that's very easy to determine. Most of us are plenty proud to talk about what the average student looks like, what the range of test scores that we receive might be. There are also a number of different resource guides out there that you can get a better sense of what the profile of the institution. And then once you know that, an honest assessment of your profile relative to that is going to be pretty important. An honest assessment, not a rose-colored assessment.
Yes, very good advice on that front. Yes. And I just to clarify, and I think it's what Carrie is saying, hopefully this comes across. There are actually lots of scholarships, again, depending on the school, that you don't have to do another thing other than submit your application for admission to be considered for.
Correct.
And we love those. We love those. But there also are highly competitive and selective scholarship programs associated with specific colleges that do in fact have a completely separate application process. So it's all just like so much in this process. It depends, and it depends on where you're looking and what's available when it comes to that, but certainly things that we can help you sort out along the way. Claudia, you have any questions?
Carrie, you mentioned the net price calculator. Could you kind of explain what that is and how accurate do you think they are?
A net price calculator, again, is going to be on every college's website. I would say the more expensive the college, the more effort they've probably put into it. I don't know if that's 100% true, but it's truthy. And I would imagine that that could be a reliable gauge. The other thing you can do is do 3 or 4 of them, right? Don't just do one for one college. I would do one at least 3 or 4 or 5 of the colleges in which there's interest and see how they vary. And if they start giving you similar results, you probably are pretty close.
Okay.
That makes sense. That's good. What about, this is getting a little bit into more nitty gritty in terms of how things are calculated with EFC and such. Does it matter if you have more than one child in college at a time?
Yes, absolutely it does. So let's go back to that expected family contribution. And we'll go back to that family whose expected family contribution is $50,000. That doesn't change because you have 2 children in college. That stays the same. What changes is the cost of education. So in effect, that EFC is split in 2 in that case. So that in maybe the EFC for child number 1, not that there's a number 1 child, but you know,
Eldest.
yes, the first one to go off is $25,000 or $50,000 in year 1, but year 2 comes along and younger brother or sister enters, and now that $50,000 is split in 2.
And a quick follow-up on that. So say as I'm heading in with child number 1, I'm feeling good about, I can cover this year, so I'm not filing a FAFSA. Am I at a disadvantage down the road when child number 2 comes through, or am I sort of hitting reset then?
You're hitting reset then.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. Now, the caveat there would be with those state grant programs that I mentioned earlier. You know, there may be a state requirement that you needed to do that as a high school senior. That's a different thing.
Got it.
We have a question from the audience here. If your family makes enough money to cover college tuition entirely, will the student be rolled out for merit scholarships at all?
Not typically, no. I can't imagine why a college would do that. Merit scholarships are, again, based on talent and ability. If that student is competitive in that pool for something that the college values, they're going to want to try to attract that student.
Great.
I wouldn't worry about that.
And this was a question that was asked of me prior to this event. And well, it sort of ties into, I guess, the state grant programs that you're mentioning, but do I need to file the FAFSA in some cases for merit money? Are there institutions that need you to do that for their merit money?
There may be. I have not worked for one of them, so I would not want to speak for all institutions.
Right.
So I'm going to narrow it down to the ones I know something about.
Right.
No. So I would say the answer is no. At the same time, if you don't file, you're telling us you're not interested in money. So if you come back to me in April and go, well, I didn't get a merit scholarship and I'm not sure I can afford this after all, I'm going to say, you didn't apply. There's not much we can do at this stage.
Interesting. Okay. Good to know.
So if you think you might need money, I'd apply.
Yeah.
Carrie,
And
Go
it may
ahead.
be, it may be that you do it year one and it doesn't work and you don't qualify and you don't have to worry about it ever again.
Right, okay.
I'm sorry, Claudia.
I think a lot of people are worried that applying for financial aid will hurt their child's chances for being admitted. Can you speak to that?
All right, so there's a concept out there called need blind admission. And the converse of need blind admission is need aware admission. So there are some colleges in the country that practice need blind admission. They have no idea at the point of admission whether you've applied for need-based aid or not. That's an increasingly small pool of colleges and universities, usually just the very wealthiest ones in the country. Other colleges have to be a little more circumspect. By and large, in my experience, and again, this is something I would not speak for every college and university out there. The simple act of applying for need-based aid shouldn't make a tremendous difference at most colleges and universities that I'm familiar with. At the same time, somebody with extremely high need, or you expect to have extremely high need, I think that's a fair question to ask an individual college. It's a very fair question.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, I think we might have another question here. Is there any reason not to complete the FAFSA? And not is all caps.
If you are so fortunate as to make several $1 million a year in adjusted gross, I wouldn't worry about it. If you were the beneficiary of an estate that makes you independently wealthy, I wouldn't worry about it. So I go back to the slide where I said, if you know you can afford it and you don't want to worry about it, then don't apply.
Okay, that's good. Carrie, what if you've filled out the FAFSA or the CSS profile and some things change in your circumstances, and that may be sort of COVID related, because there could be some people who are suffering from issues related to that already.
Sure. Yeah, I did promise to get back to that.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. There are always ways to update your FAFSA or CSS profile. And the financial aid office at the college can help you do that. It's a little trickier with the CSS profile. You're going to write a letter and offer some documentation. With the FAFSA, you're going to go into the website and simply update. So if they're going to give you a pin, they're going to give you, some things you're going to want to make sure you remember or know where they are. So write down the pin, write down the ID numbers and so forth, so you can get back in the federal website and update that information, do a revision. That's not a big deal.
Mhm.
You can also write a letter to any college and say, this happened, right? They may ask you to document it, and you may just want to go ahead and do that with the letter as supporting evidence. It's not that they don't believe you, but colleges get audited. And the way we use our dollars matters. They have to be used consistent with, they were gifts from somebody at some point. We have to use them as they were intended to be used, as an example. So colleges are audited. That's why they're asking for the documentation. And you might as well go ahead and supply that. They may come back with a few more questions. And there's nothing at all wrong about getting on the phone or a Zoom with a given college to talk through anything that you have questions about. Kim and Claudia cannot do that for you.
If my student receives a scholarship or, aid award early in the year, say January, February, when do I have to let them know that I'm accepting that aid?
You would typically do that at the same time you're letting them know whether you're going to choose to attend, right? So for most students, unless they applied early decision, and that's a whole nother thing, but for most students, they'll find that most selective colleges have a national candidates reply date of May 1st. You have until that date to say, yes, I'm coming. And at that time, you're also going to say, and thank you for the scholarship and the financial aid award. You'll probably do that online through some sort of portal. We all have portals now, and you click some boxes and click submit. But that's how you do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Check if there's any other questions. We're about ready to wrap up, folks. So if you do have any questions, now would be the time to ask them while we've got our expert here.
All right, well, that just means the presentation was so thorough. We've covered everything as always with Carrie. And we, again, can't thank you enough for joining us. I wish we were in person and could celebrate after, as in the olden days. But
I'll hold you to it too.
okay, very, very good. To those of you who did join in, thank you for being here. If questions arise down the road, reach out, let us know. And if we can't answer it, we'll call Carrie or somebody else who can help you. But I do want to reiterate what he said about utilizing the folks at the colleges, because they really are the experts. These are the people who do this for a living. And so I have for years in my career referred to them directly to say, call Gettysburg, call Center, ask them the questions, and they will. And they're great people to talk to about these kinds of things. So take advantage of that as well. Any parting shots from you, Claudia?
Just want to thank everybody for being here, and particularly for Carrie for taking time to be with us this evening. We appreciate your insight and your expertise.
You are welcome. Glad to be here. Glad to see you both. Hope to see you in person somewhere down the road.
Somewhere down the road.
Sooner than later.
Sooner than later.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.